All right, today we've got a question in from Brandon. This is a question that probably a lot of people are interested in knowing more about. The question goes like this. Proverbs 13:24, whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. So Brandon's question is about do I have to discipline my child with a rod? Is that what it's telling me? And the thing I would say is it's not just that one proverb. Actually, the book of Proverbs, which is a book given to us to understand wisdom, has a lot to say about this subject. I'm just going to give you the whole list here. Proverbs 19:18, discipline your children, for in that there is hope. Do not be a willing party to their death. Proverbs 22:15, folly is bound up in the heart of a child. If you've had a child, you know this is true, but the rod of discipline will drive it far from them. Proverbs 23:13, do not withhold discipline for a child, for if you punish them with the rod, they will not die. Keep that in mind. If you punish them with the rod, they will not die. A rod and a reprimand impart wisdom. Sometimes you can talk and you can talk and you can talk, but Proverbs is saying, but the rod and a reprimand, they give this wisdom and actually sinks in. But a child left undisciplined disgraces its mother. And one more, Proverbs 29:17, discipline your children and they will give you peace. They will bring you the delights you desire. So it's not like it's just one proverb and you're like, well, what does that really mean? It talks about discipline, and it talks about discipline a lot. So there's three things that I would say about those proverbs and what Scripture is teaching us about how to raise our children. The first one is the motivation. Like, what is your motivation for disciplining your child? So the motivation in those proverbs is, hey, you're trying to save them from mistakes they're going to make in the future by giving them consequences right now. While they're in your home and while they're developing and while they're growing up, you're trying to give them consequences now so that when they get out there later in life, they're not going to make those mistakes, and it's going to be on this huge, epic scale. That is not always the motivation of a parent. A lot of times parents are disciplining their children because they've had a bad day, because they're not happy with the way their life is turning out, because maybe they're just sometimes emotionally unstable. And so what they do is they take it out on their kids. And you know the difference. Some kids that were raised being spanked with a rod or a paddle or a belt, they almost brag about it. Like, yeah, my dad did this, or my mom did this, and or they made me go out and pick a switch, and it's like there's this respect that they have for them. And yeah, they hated it when it was happening, but they have this respect for their parents because they did it in their life. And then there's parents or kids that have grown up, and you can tell it did not come from the right motivation. It came because their parents were angry. They were depressed. They were taking out their life on them. And so the motivation has always got to be for the child's best interest. You're concerned about what's happening to them in the future. The second thing that I would say about discipline and what these proverbs are saying is it's got to be something they don't like. I mean, that's whether it's a rod or spanking or what other forms of discipline there are, it's got to be something that they don't like and they can't manipulate. So we've experimented with all kinds of forms of discipline, and sometimes I look at other people with their kids, and it just looks like the kid's in control, right? Because the discipline that's being used isn't really working because the kid almost enjoys it because it gives them an opportunity to manipulate the situation. It's almost like some kids wake up in the morning and go, man, all right, I'm bored. Let's go control mom all day long. And it ends up being a long, hard day because the discipline in the end, it's not just something maybe they don't really like it, but it's something that they can manipulate. It's something that they can use. And so in the long run, that ends up being bad, both for mom and dad, and it ends up being bad for the kids. So this proverb, and that's why this has been such a popular form of discipline for thousands of years, and why the book of Proverbs talks about actually using physical discipline, is because it's swift. It's not something the kids can negotiate with. It's not something they can manipulate. They just know they don't like it, and those consequences they don't want to experience again. And the third thing that I would really hit on is, it seems to me, and I can just promise you this, a parent who does not consistently discipline their child — consistent is a big word, consistent, like every time — consistently discipline their child ends up being far more abusive than a parent that doesn't consistently consistently discipline their child. And here's why: because you've seen this play out. A parent that doesn't consistently discipline ends up not having any outlet. They don't know what to do, and so they end up like saying words that are really hurtful. They end up being manipulative. They end up trying to control their children through manipulation and hurtful words, and that is not a good way. And a lot of times people that are totally against any kind of physical discipline, these are the parents that end up getting so angry and so frustrated because they have no way to direct their child's life, that they end up being abusive. They end up slapping them in the face just out of frustration or anger, and then they feel terrible and they move. I tell you what, a parent that doesn't consistently discipline their child will end up being abusive. And so, long story short, do you have to use a rod? No. Do you have to use physical discipline? No. What this proverb is teaching, just make it something that is for the right reason. Make sure it's something they don't like. And at the end of the day, you are going to be saving them from something that's happening in the future. So, hey, ask your question. Doesn't matter how big, how small, just ask your question and we will answer it.